What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be discussing a really cool tech option that you could play inside of your Shaddoll decks. It's an engine that I've personally come to love playing in this deck a lot, and that is the hero build with Vision Hero Vyon to search out polymerizations, to search out lights, and to make your Shaddoll deck more consistent. List is pretty similar to the Shaddoll list that I posted previously, however, with the new hero cards incorporated in place of some of the other consistency options we were playing. So jumping into the deck, we have all three of all of our consistency Shaddoll cards. You want to have at least one of these cards in your hand when you start. That way, if you fuse on your first turn, you're at least getting additional card advantage from it. All of these cards are very important. These two cards are the most important because they're your major play starters. Typically, hands where you see a Squamata or a Wendy are like all gas. You know, you can do a lot of stuff, set up a lot of plays, which is really cool. Beast is really good, especially in the mirror match, because it allows you to tribute over your extra deck monsters in the set position, making it so that you can turn off your opponent's Shaddoll fusions, as well as just being able to draw 2, discard 1 puts on a lot of pressure. 2200 body, that's relatively easy to get onto the board with Wendy during your opponent's turn, and if it survives, you know, you flip summon it, and that's quite a bit of damage. And Hedgehog, the fact that it searches spells or searches your polymerizations is really important in this deck, so I think it warrants its spot at 3. As I've talked a lot in previous videos, Shaddoll's mainly suffers when it doesn't see its fusion spells, but when it does see fusion, oh boy, this deck pops off super hard. Continuing on to the rest of our Shaddolls, play 1 Dragon, 1 Aerial. Both these cards are really good. Dragon helps you out random cards, so it's pretty important to have in the deck. I would consider siding a second copy for specific matchups. And then also Shaddoll Aerial. This is like your major combo enabler. Allows you to deny your opponent a lot of resources, specifically in the mirror match. If you're scared of destroying a window or a construct in the mirror, if you're able to trigger your aerial effect first, you can like banish all of their fusion cards, so when you crash into their monster, they're guaranteed to not float back the Shaddoll fusion for the next turn, so you can play a little bit more loose with your extra deck monsters and leave them on the board versus clearing them yourself by like tribute setting Beast over the top of them. Both these cards are really good staple 1-ofs. No longer a Falco in the main deck. I had to cut it to make room for other stuff. And like my biggest issue with it wasn't a consistency card like the other ones, and it didn't have like the extra utility that Dragon had, and it didn't have the combo potential that Aerial had. So I didn't like really think it makes the cut. But I think it's potentially worth playing. I just found it really hard to find the room for just even the 1 copy of it because I wanted to max out on everything else. Continuing on to our hero engine, this is the really cool stuff in here. We got 1 Vision Hero Vyon, 1 Elemental Hero Shadow Mist, and 1 Elemental Hero Honest Neos. Now these cards are actually insane, like pretty crazy. Vyon on its own is a +2. Like the fact that you can just normal summon this card, dump Shadow Mist trigger, adds Elemental Hero Honest Neos to your hand. Vyon will banish your Shadow Mist and search you out a copy of Polymerization, and boom, just like that. Like all the problems that Shaddoll's had are gone. You have your light, you have a Polymerization, and you have a monster on board to make a cross sheep with. So like this card literally does everything that you want it to do for this version of Shaddoll, which is really cool. And a really cool interactions is like you can search this card out and then have this on your turn so that you can like attack over an Avermax, or even just like leave the Vyon out by itself, and like it can be kind of difficult for your opponent to clear if they don't have the right cards to clear it, especially like with a window, so you can leave it for like the next turn. Or we have later in the deck, I'll show you, we play like a 1-of Mass Change 2 to go with this engine, so that like on the turns where you open the absolute gas and you don't need to like search out this with the Shadow Mist effect, or you already open this and you don't want to get like an unnecessary search, you can summon the Shadow Mist back during a later part of the turn to add Mass Change 2, so that you can make Dark Law backed up with an Honest Neos, which is pretty cool. Overall, like I said, this engine adds a lot of consistency to the deck, a lot of explosive power, and I think it's really like one of the best cheap options that you have as a Shaddoll player for improving the consistency and power of your deck outside of the invoked engine. Continuing on, still made room for the damage jugglers and the other 2 Performage cards. just a 2-2 split. Had to make room for the hero engine by cutting down on these. The main cards that I took out from my previous deck profile were the Spellbook engine, because that was about 5 cards, and the hero engine I think is about 8, so we had to find room in other places. And unfortunately, this is what gave. This engine is still really strong. There's still some hands where you want to use your Hat Tricker effect to get that additional monster, so that's why I think it warrants the inclusion. Trick Clown is still an insane card. Like, this is still like the best light monster in the deck. I've stopped a ton of lethal damage, a ton of Boral Swords for game with just Smile, Trick Clown. So like, this deck has the longevity to just not die when your opponent tries to go for game, which is really, really cool. And the fact that these are all lights make it worth playing in this deck because Construct is such an important card. Continuing on, we have our 3 copies of Shaddoll Fusion and 3 copies of L Shaddoll Fusion. Now these are the polymerizations for the deck, quote unquote, right? And to go with it, we also I'll pull these out now. We have 2 copies of regular polymerization. Oh, fun fact with Vyon, adding on to that, Vyon's not once per turn. So if you can when you send Vyon to the graveyard, if you resurrect this with Cross Sheep, you can actually search the second copy of polymerization by banishing your copy of Honest Neos that you likely sent to graveyard to fuse for Construct, which makes this card even crazier because like it's potentially even a +3 at that point, you know, off of just seeing 1 card, which is pretty nuts. But overall, these cards are in here to boost the number of fusions that we have in our deck. It's really, really important that you see a fusion turn 1. All of these cards are really fantastic. I don't think these cards need too much explanation, right? Quick play allows you to play during your opponent's turn. If your opponent has extra cards, you go like +5 off of this card, which is insane. That might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but you guys know what I mean. And then just vanilla polymerization is super, super critical sometimes. So like having a nice 8 count of polymerization plus like the 3 copies of Vyon plus our 1 copy of A Hero Lives gives us 12 copies, quote unquote, of polymerization in the deck, which I think is really good. Previously, when I was playing this deck, it was like 6 copies, and I just was not seeing it nearly as much as I needed to be. So it definitely warranted revisiting this deck to give it some kind of revamp. And I think, like I said, the hero engine does that. 3 copies of super polymerization. There's literally so much Shaddolls at my locals. I go to locals and play like 2 or 3 out of 5 rounds being Shaddoll Mirrors. So I've just slapped this into the main deck every time after that. It's got good matchups, or it's got good utility across every matchup at the moment. This allows you to break boards while making your own, which is really strong for Shaddolls because your fusion targets are really, really quality stuff. So I think it's worth playing. Alternatively, you could play like hand traps if you really wanted to. Continuing on, another consistency card in the deck, 3 copies of Allure of Darkness. We have a relatively high dark count in the deck, something like 12 darks, which means that you're pretty consistently going to see a dark plus Allure, or you're going to be able to Allure into darks. Allure also triggers all of your Shaddoll effects, or the Shaddoll, I guess the Shaddoll effects like Wendy and Ariel, who are not darks. So if you have to discard off of Allure, sometimes it's not even that bad. I've had games where I've discarded Wendy and Damage Juggler off of my Allure of Darkness after I had set a Shaddoll Fusion, so I was able to actually play the game from there, even though I didn't draw into any darks to banish off of its effect. Moving on to the 1-ups of the deck, we have our 1 Mass Change 2 for the situation where it comes up. This card has been honestly kind of overperforming. Dark Law is a really hard card to out. I might want to play more copies of this. It's just really hard to find the space for it at the moment, which I think sucks. But overall, the cost is kind of heavy too, but this card allows you to access one of the most busted cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! So it might warrant another look at more copies than 1. We also have 1 copy of Rhoda. We want to search out our Vyon. I wish we could play more copies of Vyon. I wish that Hero Call or E-Emergency Call searched out Vyon, but it doesn't. So we have to make do with what we have. So in this case, we just have our 1 copy of Rhoda. And then we have 1 Resh Shaddoll Incarnation. This card's pretty good. Allows you to float a lot in the game. If you're playing matchups where the grinding matters more, instead of using its banish effect to flip a card face up, you literally can set this card every single turn and then construct, add it back, construct or win to add it back to your hands, and then reset it to reset another Shaddoll on the next turn. Allows you to grind really, really hard. Allows you to like reset fusions and stuff, which is pretty cool. Yeah. And then the last card in the deck, the card that I've been, oh my god, this card, I can't rave enough about Pot of Avarice. Like, At first I was hesitant about playing this card. It was kind of a meme, but this card has just been overperforming like crazy. Like the fact that you can shuffle back your entire extra deck for the most part, like take a huge chunk of your fusions and just put them back in the extra, is really, really good. You can also put back like your singleton Shaddoll cards back into your deck to use them additional times. Drawing 2 cards is pretty busted, especially if you're recycling resources. This deck gets to 5 cards in the graveyard easy. Like halfway through your first turn of the game, you'll have 5 cards. Like you won't even have finished your combo yet, and you'll have turned this card on. So for that reason, I think it's definitely worth playing. And if this was at like 3, I would definitely highly consider playing 2. Maybe 3 is too clunky, just because, you know, having 5 in the extra deck is, or 5 in the graveyard is a little tough. But it is a ton of recursion, so maybe we'll see. Moving on to the extra deck. Starting with the fusions, we have 3 copies of Construct. Best Shaddoll monster. Honestly, this sets up all of your plays. It's one of your best super poly targets because cards like Sleeper are light targets. Really just an insane card overall. 2 copies of Winda, one of your major control options. Card's really good. You have ways to like float it back, so like 3 isn't necessarily necessary. A little bit too much alliteration there, but like I said, pretty good card. And then the last Shaddoll card is 1 App Cologne. I want to find room to play one more of this, but like I still want to play a very high link count, so it's been rough finding space. But this card is really good as well. It fixes your hands in a lot of weird situations. It's very defensive, like if your opponent doesn't like know that it can't be destroyed by battle, or if they enter battle phase and you L in battle phase, like this card's hard to deal with and it can just stop in OTK. As well as the fact that you can force like Appaloosas early during your opponent's turn with App Cologne. If you structure App Cologne earlier in the chain and then chain block with your cards that were sent to graveyard, you can make it so that your opponent like gets to negate one thing but then can't use the rest of their Appaloosa negates, which is really cool. And then the last 2 fusions, 1 copy of Dark Law. Card's really fantastic. Niche cases where it comes up makes it worth playing. Played against a game at locals where like I literally did nothing but make Dark Law and pass, and my opponent couldn't out it, and I won that game. So it's pretty cool. And then the super poly target that I'm playing right now is the Starving Venom. Like I said, my locals is filled with Shaddolls. This is really dependent on what you think you're going to be playing against. So overall, like I think this card is good. You need at least one extra deck slot for like a dedicated super poly target, whether that be like Mud Dragon or the Earth Adignister is also another very good one. Honestly, it's personal choice and meta dependent. And then the Link monsters in the deck, 1 copy of Gravity Controller. This card is actually very good. The fact that it puts itself back, allows you to out cards relatively easily, is really cool. Yeah, and it's like pretty necessary sometimes. You need to like clear your window right away at the beginning of your turn, otherwise you get locked into it, and this allows you to do that. And for my Link 2s, we got a few of them. We got 1 copy of Cross Sheep, 1 copy of Shaddoll Construct, and 1 copy of Psy Frame Lambda. All these cards are super important. Cross Sheep is definitely the best card in this extra deck. Allows you to go through all of your plays and like recycle your resources very effectively. This card is insane. Shaddoll Construct is insane once you get it in circulation, but the 2 flip requirement is actually really hefty. It can be pretty difficult sometimes if you don't open like the specific Shaddoll or the specific like 3-card combos in the first turn of the game to get this cycling in. But once you do get this cycling in, the fact that this is a fusion summon every turn is really good. The fact that it procs your all of your Shaddoll effects every turn is very good. The fact that it's a Link 2 that you can summon from the graveyard is really good as well, because it makes it going into like your Link 4s a lot easier. And then the Psy Frame Lambda is just because I wanted a another generic Link 2 that I could just go into, like with a Link monster or a fusion monster. I was originally playing like IP in this spot, but I'm like, there's times when like my Link zone gets clogged and I want to clear it for downward pointing arrows so I can Link summon more. Like especially with this card, like if Gravity Controller sticks for a turn, you want to be able to link it off and keep playing. And if you've already used like your Cross Sheep, it's kind of hard. So for that reason, maybe this should actually just be the 2nd copy of Cross Sheep, but right now I only own 1, so I'm only playing 1. And then the last cards in the deck, we have 1 Link 3. Decode Talker is ironically like one of the best links that you can go into right now with this deck, because The Vyon plus a Wendy or a Squamata is like a 2-card combo that nets you like Winda this plus a little bit of interruption, which is really cool. So I think this is warrants playing because there's no other real Link 3s that give you disruption options. And then for my Link 4s, Avermax prevents your board from being attacked and prevents your Windas from being outed, which is really good. And Boral Sword attacks for game. But overall, I think both of these cards warrant their spots, even though they are a little bit hefty. But this deck spams cards like crazy, which makes it relatively easy for this deck to come through and be able to go into those monsters when it needs to. Overall, this has been my take on Shaddoll Heroes. I know the hero engine isn't too hefty, but Vyon on its own is really all you need. Like, this card is pretty crazy. Hope you guys try this out and tell me how it goes for you. It's been going pretty well for me testing this card. With that being said, this is Undercollect here. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.